We are both familiar with and unfamiliar with many forms of life in nature. The pangolin is one of them. For a long time, they have appeared in our lives as food and medicine. Their meat is eaten, and their scales used in medicine. People seem to know them well, but all of this is partial and fragmented. When we want to truly understand this animal, it's almost impossible to find them anymore. Not just a world of sea breezes and coconut trees. At the center of this vast Chinese island lies a large tract of ant and termite forest. This was once home to the Chinese pangolin. At least, it used to be. Since 2014, the Kadoorie Farm and Botanic Garden in Hong Kong has been conducting a year-long survey of wild pangolins in Hainan, including areas like Yingling and Xianling. Many people might think pangolins need to live in pristine forests or in very remote woodlands. But actually, if we don't catch them, they don't have particularly high habitat requirements. They can even be found close to human settlements. There are hardly any footprints. They're small and hard to spot. When it rains, and they go out to forage, they get mud on their bodies, leaving muddy trails wherever they go. So we search for them by following these traits. They forage at night and rest somewhere during the day. If we see a hole where it's sleeping, we'll try to determine whether it's inside that burrow. In the reserve's forest, staff trek through mountains and rivers, searching for pangolin burrows and traces, and also interview communities near the reserve in hopes of finding clues to their whereabouts. From our interviews and field investigations, it's become clear that it's nearly impossible to find pangolins in the wild. We visited many forested areas. If you ask locals whether there are any pangolins left, they'll think you're joking. It's as rare as asking whether there are still tigers in South China. China has 3 species of pangolins. Among them, the Chinese pangolin once had the largest population and the widest distribution. It was once widespread across southern provinces of China. Chinese pangolins mostly live on grassy slopes and in forested areas with a high number of ants. They rest in burrows during the day and are active at night. Deep soil layers mean little to them. Though their front claws aren't sharp, they are excellent digging tools. Their strong hind legs push the soil aside. With a keen sense of smell, they locate underground termite or ant nests. Termites and ants are their primary food sources. A pangolin weighing around 3 kilograms can eat 300 to 400 grams of termites in one go. Once they find a nest, they can dig a hole over a meter deep in minutes and completely consume the entire colony. While many animals fear ant bites, Pangolins are unfazed. When in danger, they curl up into a ball to protect themselves from predators, but this also makes them easy for humans to catch. Humans have hunted and used pangolins since ancient times. Back then, pangolins were easy to catch. Everyone caught them, and it wasn't illegal. There were no protections in place. The meat was eaten, and the scales sold to state-run supply centers. A gin, 500 grams of scales, sold for only 3 to 4 yuan. Until the late 20th century, many southern provinces still had supply centers purchasing large quantities of pangolin scales. According to incomplete statistics, in the 1960s, the annual harvest of pangolins in China was around 150,000 to 160,000 individuals. The worst time was when live pangolins were being bought. People would specifically catch them alive for sale. You could often see people carrying 2 or 3 at a time. Since the early 1980s, the wild Chinese pangolin population began to decline. The sharpest drop came in the 1990s. Annual harvests fell to just a few thousand, and many supply centers could no longer source any. Actually, more than 10 years ago, Traffic had already begun research on pangolins. In 2006, we had a market survey project at the time, mainly targeting major traditional medicine markets in China, pharmacies, and some restaurants near the border. The goal was to understand the consumption of pangolin scales and meat at that time. Then last year, we revisited these markets. When conducting physical and online market research, we noticed a very peculiar phenomenon. In some markets selling collectibles or antiques, we found pangolin scales, specifically large scales imported from Africa, that had carvings on them. They had been crafted into decorative items. Additionally, pangolin scales were carved into combs and sold that way. But the most surprising thing we found was pangolin claws. We thought it looked very familiar, but couldn't immediately identify it. Later, the vendor explained that this was called a mojing fu, demonic charm. We asked how it was used, and he said it was mainly used as a decorative piece that supposedly had the power to ward off evil. Then he further explained why this had become trendy in the collectibles market. A few years ago, a film called The Lost Tomb featured a main character who wore such a charm. Because of that single scene, the pangolin claw demonic charm triggered a bizarre and unreasonable consumer trend, especially in the antique market. According to incomplete statistics, since the 1960s, the population of the Chinese pangolin has declined by about 89% to 94%. This has drawn the attention and response of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES. In early 2017, all 8 species of pangolins worldwide were upgraded from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1. According to CITES, this means international commercial trade is strictly prohibited. That applies to all 8 species of pangolins globally. The reasons are several. First, the Asian pangolins, including our Chinese pangolin and also the Malayan pangolin, are now assessed by the IUCN as critically endangered. And even now, illegal trafficking and smuggling are still taking place at a significant scale. Based on this reality, at least The Chinese and Malayan pangolins are already in a state of survival crisis, qualifying for Appendix Force Protection. We cannot deny that the Chinese have a large demand for using wildlife body parts in traditional Chinese medicine. This is the primary and perhaps the only reason why pangolins have been hunted so heavily in the past. The damage caused by the consumption and trade of pangolins far exceeds their ability to survive and reproduce. Pangolins have become extremely rare in the wild, so rare that calling them hard to come by is now unrealistic. In late July 2017, the Zhejiang Provincial Forest Resource Monitoring Center unexpectedly received a baby Chinese pangolin. In a county in western Zhejiang, a villager found the juvenile pangolin by the roadside and took it to the local forestry bureau, which then sent it to a wildlife rescue center. Rescue seems to be the only way to encounter a wild pangolin nowadays. In recent years, wildlife rescue centers in Beijing, Shenzhen, and Guangxi have received a number of pangolins, but alarmingly, most of them were seized from illegal trade by law enforcement, and many had severe health issues. In our experience at the rescue center, we saw 4 pangolins, 3 Malayan, and 1 Chinese. One of the Malayan pangolins died shortly after arriving. When they come in, they usually have severe respiratory problems, especially since it's cold in Beijing. Some already have pneumonia. Also, many of them had been force-fed cornmeal paste, some likely through the mouth, and some perhaps even rectally. This is done to increase their weight for sale while keeping them alive. But after rescue, this force feeding severely affects their survival due to damage to the digestive tract. Whether fed orally or rectally, the injury is significant. Once they arrive, they often defecate cornmeal or suffer from diarrhea. Additionally, due to their singular diet and high habitat requirements, artificial breeding of pangolins has an extremely low success rate. Many rescued pangolins ultimately die. And a bigger problem is the lack of safe places for release. If they're released, they're likely to be captured again. One Chinese pangolin survived 3 years in rescue, but died after that. In terms of artificial rescue, 3 years is quite long. A rescue center should help the animal recover and return to the wild. That's what defines a successful rescue. But this one was never released, even though it had fully recovered. We believed it was ready. If a rescued animal cannot be returned to the wild, the rescue is ultimately a failure. It serves no purpose. It doesn't benefit the wild population. But we couldn't find a suitable place or scientific method for reintroduction. Field surveys yield no sightings. Rescues succeed, but releases fail. Pangolins in China are on the brink. Where lies the hope for their survival? Taiwan, China's largest island. In 2015, a research team from the College of Life Sciences at National Pingtung University of Science and Technology was lucky to discover a group of wild pangolins, around 50 individuals, living around village edges unafraid of human presence. In densely populated Hong Kong, the Kadoorie Farm and Botanic Garden also discovered wild pangolins. These two places may be the last refuges for wild pangolins in China. In Taiwan and Hong Kong, perhaps due to greater public awareness, wild pangolins still exist in viable numbers. For many critically endangered species, the reasons for their decline are nearly identical. In the end, I believe that public education is still a major area where we can do more. While great efforts have already been made, the facts before us show that we haven't done enough. We still know too little about pangolins. We've taken so much from these beings exploited for centuries, and we owe them too much. They deserve our protection. They deserve the right to live. And now is their opportunity and ours the final chance.